I'm Madison, 29, and I always believed family meant unconditional love until my terminal diagnosis changed everything. When I needed them most, my parents vanished, only to reappear with my sister when they thought they'd inherit my fortune. They didn't know I'd spent my final days preparing a letter that would ensure justice beyond the grave. Death teaches you who truly loves you and gives you one last chance to write your own ending. If you're watching this, let me know where you're from in the comments and hit that subscribe button if you've ever wondered what you'd do if your family betrayed you when you needed them most. Growing up in suburban Boston, my life seemed picture-perfect from the outside. Our colonial-style house sat on a tree-lined street in Newton, where neighbors complimented my mother's garden and my father's perfectly maintained lawn. I was Madison Hayes, the dutiful daughter who made her parents proud with straight A's and dance recitals. My sister Heather was 5 years younger than me, with the same chestnut hair but lighter eyes, hazel instead of my deep brown. As kids, we were inseparable despite the age gap. I'd help her with homework, braid her hair before school, and defend her from neighborhood bullies. When she turned 16 and had her first heartbreak, it was my shoulder she cried on. I believed nothing could break our bond. After graduating with honors from Boston University, I became a pediatric physical therapist at Children's Hospital. There was something magical about helping kids regain their strength and confidence after injuries or surgeries. The joy on a child's face when they took their first steps after months of therapy made every challenging day worthwhile. My colleagues became like family, especially my best friend Ashley Sullivan, who worked in pediatric oncology. The irony of that connection wouldn't hit me until later. It was at a hospital fundraiser that I met Ryan Carpenter, an architectural engineer with kind eyes and a quick smile. We connected instantly over our shared love of helping others. He designed accessible housing for people with disabilities. After dating for 2 years, Ryan proposed during a weekend trip to Cape Cod. We planned our wedding for the following spring, dreaming of a backyard ceremony followed by a honeymoon in Italy. We talked about having 2 children and buying a fixer-upper to renovate together. The future stretched before us, bright with possibility. My parents, Barbara and Thomas Hayes, maintained a carefully crafted image of success and family devotion. My father was a financial advisor who wore tailored suits and played golf with clients on weekends. My mother, a former beauty queen turned real estate agent, hosted dinner parties where everything from the table settings to the dessert was Instagram perfect. They attended every school function, cheered at every graduation, but their love always felt conditional. When I brought home an A- in advanced chemistry, my father's disappointment was palpable. Hayes women don't settle for almost perfect, he said. When I chose physical therapy over medical school, my mother didn't speak to me for a week. We didn't pay for private school, so you could help people exercise, she said, as if helping children walk again was somehow beneath our family's dignity. Despite these moments, I maintained hope that deep down, they truly loved me for who I was, not what I achieved. I kept trying to earn their approval, while building my own life on my terms. My grandmother, my father's mother, had been different. Sarah Hayes had been warm, unconditional in her love, and fiercely independent. When she passed away 3 years before my diagnosis, she left me her brownstone in Cambridge, valued at approximately $1.2 million. My parents had been shocked by her decision, expecting the property to go to my father. She always did play favorites. My mother had commented sourly at the reading of the will. I kept the property, renting out the lower unit while living in the upper one with Ryan after we got engaged. Financial independence gave me freedom from my parents' control. I politely declined their offers to help manage my inheritance and refused their suggestions to sell the brownstone and invest the money through my father's firm. This created tension, but I stood firm, grateful for my grandmother's foresight in protecting her gift to me. Life felt good. I had meaningful work, a loving fiancé, a beautiful home, and financial security. Even my complicated relationship with my parents seemed manageable as long as I maintained certain boundaries. Heather was thriving in her junior year at Tufts University, studying psychology and planning to become a therapist herself. Then came the day I felt dizzy during a therapy session with 6-year-old Jamie, one of my favorite patients. I've been feeling unusually tired for weeks, attributing it to wedding planning stress and extra hours at work. When I nearly fainted while helping Jamie practice his balance exercises, my supervisor insisted I go home and rest. The dizziness didn't subside. The following morning, I noticed unusual bruising on my arms and legs, bruises I couldn't remember getting. Ryan convinced me to see my doctor, and I agreed, thinking it was probably just anemia or vitamin deficiency. I never imagined that appointment would be the line dividing my life into before and after, setting in motion a series of events that would reveal the true nature of my family and my own strength in the face of betrayal. The symptoms had been easy to dismiss at first. The fatigue I attributed to working 50-hour weeks. The bruises I blamed on bumping into equipment at the hospital. The weight loss seemed like a positive side effect of my pre-wedding fitness routine. But when Dr. Elaine Campbell looked at my complete blood count results, her expression changed from professional concern to something much darker. "Madison, your white blood cell count is extremely elevated, and your platelets are dangerously low," she explained, her voice gentle but serious. "I'm concerned these results are consistent with leukemia. We need to do a bone marrow biopsy to confirm." The word hung in the air between us. Leukemia, cancer of the blood. The very thing I helped children fight at work was now potentially growing inside me. I felt strangely calm, as if watching this happen to someone else. "How soon can we do the biopsy?" I asked, my medical training kicking in. Stay factual. Stay focused. 2 days later, the diagnosis was confirmed: acute myeloid leukemia, an aggressive form that required immediate treatment. At 29, with no family history of cancer, I had somehow drawn a terrible lottery ticket. Dr. Campbell explained the treatment plan: intensive induction chemotherapy to start immediately, followed by consolidation therapy, and potentially a bone marrow transplant if a donor could be found. "This is aggressive, but you're young and otherwise healthy. We have reason to be optimistic," she said, though I caught the shadow in her eyes. I knew enough about AML to understand the survival rates weren't as high as with other cancers. That evening, I invited my parents and Heather to dinner at my home, with Ryan by my side. I prepared my mother's favorite lasagna, though the smell made my stomach turn. We sat around the dining table my grandmother had left me, under the chandelier that had illuminated family gatherings for generations. "I have something to tell you all," I said after my father had finished talking about his latest business success. "I've been diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia. I'm starting treatment tomorrow." The silence was deafening. My mother's fork clattered against her plate. My father's face strained of color. Heather began to cry silently, tears tracking down her cheeks. Ryan squeezed my hand under the table as I explained the treatment plan, trying to sound confident, emphasizing Dr. Campbell's optimism about my youth and strength. "Oh, sweetie," my mother finally said, her voice wavering. This is terrible. But we'll be there every step of the way. Won't we, Thomas?" My father nodded stiffly. "Of course. The Hayes family sticks together in a crisis. Whatever you need, financially, emotionally, we're here." Heather moved to sit beside me, wrapping her arms around my shoulders. "I'll get tested as a bone marrow donor," she said immediately. "And I'll take time off school to help during your treatments." Their initial responses gave me hope. Perhaps crisis would bring out the best in my parents, revealing the unconditional love I'd always sought. Ryan remained my rock, taking leave from work to accompany me to appointments and researching clinical trials and treatment options late into the night. The first round of chemotherapy hit me like a freight train. My body, once strong enough to help lift children during therapy sessions, became weak and foreign. My hair, long and thick, always complimented by my mother, began falling out in clumps. The nausea was relentless. Ryan never flinched, holding back my hair when I vomited, changing sweat-soaked sheets, and reading to me when my eyes were too tired to focus. Ashley from work organized a meal train and hospital visit schedule among my colleagues, ensuring I was never alone during Ryan's occasional necessary absences. Heather was tested as a bone marrow donor but wasn't a match. She seemed genuinely disappointed, promising to help recruit others to the donor registry. My parents attended the first 2 chemotherapy sessions, my mother bringing magazines and my father working on his laptop in the corner of the hospital room. During the 3rd session, I caught my mother's expression as she watched a nurse help me to the bathroom, my hospital gown hanging off my rapidly thinning frame, a clump of hair left behind on the pillow. It wasn't compassion in her eyes. It was disgust, quickly masked when she noticed me watching. Later that day, I heard her in the hallway, whispering harshly to my father. "I can't do this, Thomas. Seeing her like this, it's not my Madison anymore. She looks like a cancer patient." "Keep your voice down," my father hissed. "People will think we're abandoning her." "I know," but her voice cracked. "I just wasn't prepared for this. The smell, the machines, her hair, it's too much." Their visits became shorter after that, their excuses more frequent. My mother stopped touching me altogether, as if my illness might be contagious. The promises of unwavering support began to ring hollow as the reality of my condition, messy, uncomfortable, and not quickly resolved, became apparent. As the first round of chemotherapy ended and blood tests showed it hadn't been as effective as hoped, I noticed my family's attendance at hospital visits dwindling further. The cracks in their facade of support were beginning to show, revealing something far uglier beneath. By the 2nd month of treatment, my parents' visits had dwindled to brief appearances once a week, always with transparent excuses for why they couldn't stay longer. My mother had a listing to show. My father had an important client meeting. The traffic was terrible. Their club had an event they couldn't miss. My body was at war with itself. The chemotherapy that was supposed to save me ravaged everything in its path, cancer cells and healthy ones alike. I lost 30 pounds from my already slender frame. The face in the mirror became a gaunt stranger with hollow eyes and paper-thin skin. Pain became my constant companion, bone-deep and relentless. Ryan remained steadfast, sleeping in the uncomfortable hospital chair, working remotely from my room when possible, and making our apartment a sanctuary for my brief periods at home between treatments. Ashley visited almost daily, bringing small comforts, soft socks, gentle lotions that didn't irritate my sensitive skin, audiobooks for when my eyes were too tired to read. Heather's visits became less frequent too, though she at least sent texts daily, asking how I was feeling. I sensed my parents' influence in her gradual withdrawal, glimpsed it in her parroted phrases about taking care of her own mental health and maintaining boundaries. Then came the day that revealed the true depth of my parents' betrayal. I was having a rare good afternoon, feeling strong enough to walk the hospital corridor with Ryan when I heard my parents' voices around the corner. Ryan tensed beside me, hearing them too, but I placed a hand on his arm, silently asking him to wait. Something in their tone made me want to listen unseen. "This is a nightmare, Barbara," my father was saying, his voice tight with frustration. "Do you know how much this is costing? Even with her insurance, the out-of-pocket expenses are astronomical." "It's not just the money, Thomas," my mother replied. "It's everything." The Stevensons asked about her at the club fundraiser yesterday. What was I supposed to say? That our daughter is dying of cancer at 29? Patricia's daughter just made junior partner at her law firm. Susan's son is getting married in Nantucket. And our Madison is this. My father sighed heavily. We need to be practical about this situation. If the treatments don't work, we need to consider what happens to the Cambridge property. It's a significant asset. She mentioned updating her will last week. My mother said, lowering her voice further. Ryan will probably get everything. That boy has been playing the devoted fiancé perfectly. Playing? My father scoffed. He's not playing, Barbara. That's what makes this more complicated. If he was after her money, we could protect her. But his dedication makes us look worse by comparison. Well, what are we supposed to do? Pretend this isn't the most inconvenient, embarrassing situation? I had to cancel my spa weekend to come here today, and for what? To watch her sleep and throw up? I felt Ryan's arm around my waist tighten, supporting me as my knees threatened to buckle. The casual cruelty in my mother's voice, the calculated concern about appearances and assets rather than my suffering, it crystallized something I'd always suspected, but never wanted to believe. We retreated silently to my room before they could discover us. I didn't cry. The revelation felt too profound for tears, like a fundamental shift in reality. Ryan was incandescent with rage, pacing the small hospital room, wanting to confront them immediately. I asked him not to, needing time to process what I'd heard. When my parents finally appeared at my door 30 minutes later, all false cheer and perfunctory questions about my comfort, I studied them with new eyes. The designer outfit my mother wore to a cancer ward. My father checking his watch every few minutes. The careful distance they maintained from my bed, as if illness might stain their carefully constructed image. "We can't stay long today," my mother announced after barely 10 minutes. "Your father has that dinner with the Morgans, and I need to prepare." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. They seemed relieved at my silence, mistaking it for fatigue rather than the profound reassessment of our entire relationship that it was. After that day, their visits stopped entirely. They sent texts with generic well wishes and empty promises to visit as soon as things calmed down. One particularly bad week, when infection sent my temperature soaring to 104 degrees and doctors discussed ICU transfer, they sent flowers with a card signed by their secretary. Heather called occasionally, her voice always tinged with guilt. During one call, she asked hesitantly about my financial arrangements, using awkward, rehearsed phrasing that clearly wasn't her own. "Mom and Dad were wondering if you've updated your will," she said, then rushed to add, "Not that you need one. The treatments will work. But just in case, they thought it would reduce your stress to have everything in order." The transparent attempt to gather information about my inheritance plans crystallized the family betrayal. It wasn't just my parents. They were involving my sister in their schemes. Meanwhile, my medical team delivered increasingly concerning news. The first-line treatment hadn't produced the desired remission. My cancer was proving resistant to standard approaches. Each new treatment option carried greater risks and lower chances of success. Ryan proposed formally in my hospital room after a particularly difficult round of treatment had failed. No grand gesture, just quiet determination as he knelt beside my bed, holding a simple solitaire ring. "I don't care what happens," he said, tears in his eyes. "I want to be your husband for whatever time we have. 1 day or 50 years. We married the following week in the hospital chapel, with Ashley as my maid of honor and Ryan's brother as best man. I wore a cream-colored dress Ashley had found, with a soft knit cap covering my bare scalp. My parents sent a text saying they couldn't attend due to a prior commitment. Heather at least called, crying, saying our parents had forbidden her to come. The betrayal was complete. As my body fought its losing battle, I learned my family had already written me off, not just as a daughter and sister, but as a living person with dignity and feelings. To them, I had become nothing more than a failing investment and a social embarrassment, with assets to be claimed when I was gone. By the 4th month after my diagnosis, the aggressive treatments had ravaged my body but failed to eradicate the cancer. Each new protocol brought more severe side effects: peripheral neuropathy that made my fingers and toes burn with constant pain, mouth sores that turned eating into torture, infections that required isolation, and powerful antibiotics. My immune system was virtually non-existent. The medical bills mounted despite my insurance. Experimental treatments came with higher copays and deductibles. Ryan had depleted his savings and taken a loan against his 401k to cover costs my parents could have easily afforded but never offered to help with. He never complained, working remotely when possible and taking family leave when necessary, but I saw the toll it was taking on him. The dark circles under his eyes, the weight loss, the way his hands sometimes trembled with exhaustion. Despite everything, our wedding day in the hospital chapel remained a bright memory in a darkening landscape. Ryan had transformed the sterile space with fairy lights and fresh flowers. Ashley had helped me apply makeup to my gaunt face and arranged a wispy scarf over my bald head. Dr. Campbell and several nurses attended, along with Ryan's small family who had flown in from Michigan. The ceremony was brief, but perfect. When the chaplain pronounced us husband and wife, Ryan kissed me so gently, as if I might break. "I've loved you since the moment I saw you," he whispered against my lips. "And I'll love you long after our time together ends." The hospital photographer captured the moment. My skeletal hand with the new ring resting on Ryan's steady one, my four-pole decorated with white ribbons standing like a silent witness beside us. In the photo, you couldn't see the absence of my family, the empty chairs where parents and sister should have been. As my condition worsened and traditional options dwindled, I reached out to my family one more time. Not for reconciliation. I had accepted the truth of their abandonment, but because I needed practical support. A new clinical trial offered a slim chance, but required significant upfront costs and travel to another hospital. "I need to speak with you and Dad," I told my mother over the phone, my voice rasping from throat inflammation. "It's important." There was a pause then. "We're actually quite busy this week, Madison. Your father has that conference in Chicago, and I'm showing the Peterson estate." "Mom," I said, fighting to keep my voice steady.
"I'm dying."
"The doctors are talking about hospice care. There's one more treatment option, but I need help." Another pause. "We'll send someone to discuss options with you." The someone turned out to be Gerald Wilson, my father's company lawyer, who arrived the next day with a leather portfolio and a practiced expression of sympathy that never reached his eyes. Ryan insisted on being present, sitting protectively beside my hospital bed. "Your parents asked me to discuss some financial matters with you," Wilson began, extracting documents from his portfolio. "They're concerned about your ability to manage your affairs given your condition." He slid papers across the tray table. I recognized a power of attorney form and documents related to my Cambridge property. "These would grant your parents authority to manage your assets during your illness," he explained smoothly. "They're concerned about the property sitting empty while you're hospitalized and about medical decisions if you become incapacitated." Ryan started to speak, but I placed my hand over his. "What exactly would these documents do?" I asked, though I already knew. "Simply allow your parents to act in your best interest regarding financial and medical decisions. Standard procedure in situations like yours." "Situations like mine," I repeated. "You mean when someone is dying and has valuable assets?" Wilson shifted uncomfortably. "I wouldn't phrase it that way." "How would you phrase it?" "Because my parents haven't visited me in 6 weeks. They didn't attend my wedding. They haven't contributed $1 toward my medical expenses. And now they want control of my property, the property my grandmother specifically left to me, not to them. They're simply trying to help." "No," I interrupted, my voice stronger than it had been in weeks. "They're trying to secure my inheritance before I'm even dead. Please tell my parents that I will not be signing these documents and that if they want to discuss my grandmother's property, they can come see me in person." After Wilson left, I broke down in Ryan's arms, the full weight of my family's betrayal finally hitting me. They couldn't even be bothered to come themselves to try to take my property. They sent a lawyer to do their dirty work. The next day, Heather called. Her voice was tight, controlled in a way that told me she was following a script. "Madison, Mom and Dad are just trying to help you. They're worried about you making decisions while you're on so many medications." "Did they tell you they sent their lawyer to get me to sign over my property to them?" I asked. "They said they're trying to protect your assets while you're sick," she replied, avoiding my question. "Madison, have you thought about what happens after? I mean, have you updated your Wilsons getting married?" The naked attempt to extract information about my inheritance plans from my dying bed was the final straw. My own sister, who I had protected and loved, was now complicit in my parents' scheme. "Heather," I said quietly, "if you ever loved me, if any of our childhood memories meant anything to you, please stop. Don't let them turn you into this person." She was silent for a long moment. "I'm sorry," she finally whispered and hung up. The following week brought the news I had been both expecting and dreading. Dr. Campbell sat beside my bed, holding my hand as she explained that my cancer had spread to my central nervous system. The latest bone marrow biopsy showed blast cells throughout. The clinical trial I had hoped for wouldn't accept me now. "We're looking at 2 to 3 months, she said gently. "I'm so sorry, Madison. We can focus on keeping you comfortable." Ryan, who had been my strength throughout, finally broke. He sobbed against my shoulder, his body shaking with grief. I held him as best I could with my weakened arms, stroking his hair as if he were the patient needing comfort. In that moment, facing the certainty of my approaching death and the complete abandonment by my family of origin, I made a decision. If I couldn't control the cancer destroying my body, I could at least control what happened after I was gone. My parents and sister would not profit from my death after contributing nothing to my life when I needed them most. It was time to plan my final act of self-determination, a letter that would ensure justice even from beyond the grave. The days following Dr. Campbell's prognosis were the darkest. The knowledge that I had only weeks to live settled over me like a heavy blanket, smothering hope and making each breath an effort of will. I watched Ryan struggle to maintain his composure, trying to be strong for me while processing his own grief. At night, I'd wake to find him silently crying beside me, and I'd wonder which was worse, facing my own death or watching him prepare to lose me. One morning, after a particularly bad night of pain and fevered half-sleep, I found myself alone in my hospital room. Ryan had gone to shower and change at home, and the nurses were between rounds. The silence felt oppressive, filled with all the things I would never do, the life I would never live. I allowed myself 30 minutes of unrestrained despair, crying until my hospital gown was soaked with tears, raging at the unfairness, mourning the children Ryan and I would never have. When the 30 minutes ended, I wiped my face, drank some water, and made a decision. I couldn't control my cancer or my family's betrayal, but I could control what happened after I was gone. I could ensure that justice was served, that my parents and sister couldn't simply waltz in after my death and claim what they had no moral right to. I asked Ashley to bring me a notebook and pen, and I began to write. Initially, my thoughts were chaotic, a jumble of hurt, anger, and determination. But as I continued, clarity emerged. This wasn't about revenge. It was about justice, about honoring the love I had received from those who stayed, and about ensuring my legacy reflected my values, not my family's greed. When Ryan returned, I shared my thoughts with him. His initial reaction was concern that focusing on this would drain my limited energy. "Are you sure this is how you want to spend your remaining time?" he asked gently. "Wouldn't it be better to focus on peace and happy memories?" "This is what will give me peace," I explained. "Knowing that they won't profit from abandoning me, that my assets will go to people and causes that actually care. I need to do this, Ryan." Understanding dawned in his eyes, and he nodded. "Then let's do it right. We need a lawyer, not your father's people, someone independent." Ashley recommended Nathan Fisher, an estate attorney who had helped her family after her grandfather's death. Nathan arrived the next day, a tall man with kind eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. He listened without interruption as I explained my situation, the diagnosis, my family's abandonment, their attempts to gain control of my assets, and my determination to prevent them from inheriting after my death. "What you're describing is unfortunately not uncommon," Nathan said when I finished. "Terminal illness can bring out the worst in families, especially when significant assets are involved. The good news is that you're still of sound mind, and we have time to ensure your wishes are respected." Over the next week, Nathan became a regular visitor, bringing documents for me to review and sign. We created a new will that explicitly disinherited my parents and sister, stating clearly that their exclusion was deliberate and not an oversight. We established a trust for my assets, with Ryan as the primary beneficiary and trustee, and provisions for creating a foundation to help young adults with cancer. "Your parents will likely contest the will," Nathan warned. "They'll claim you were not of sound mind due to medication or that Ryan exerted undue influence." "How do we prevent that?" I asked. "Documentation," he replied. "We'll have your doctors certify your mental competence. We'll videotape you explaining your decisions." And most importantly, we'll create a detailed letter explaining your reasoning, not just the legal language in the will, but your personal statement about why you've made these choices. The letter became my project, my purpose during those difficult days. When pain allowed, I would work on it, pouring my heart onto the pages. I described my childhood, the conditional love I'd received, the abandonment during my illness. I detailed the overheard conversations, the lawyer's visit, my sister's complicity. But I also wrote about Ryan's unwavering support, Ashley's friendship, the kindness of my medical team, and the foundation I hoped to establish. As my physical strength waned, my determination grew. I worked with Nathan to ensure the letter would be legally admissible if my family contested the will. We arranged for witnesses to verify I had written it of my own free will, without coercion. Ryan supported me through it all, though I could see the toll it took on him to hear me planning for a world without me in it. "I'd give anything for more time with you," he said one evening as he helped me organize my papers. "But I'm proud of what you're doing. You're facing this with such courage." "Not courage," I corrected him. "Love. For you, for the life we should have had, for the people I want to help after I'm gone." As my condition deteriorated, we added a video component to my testimony. Seated in my hospital bed, looking directly into the camera despite my gaunt appearance, I stated my wishes clearly, explaining why I had chosen to exclude my family from my will. I described their absence during my illness and their attempts to gain control of my assets before my death. "I want it known that this decision is made with full awareness and clear mind," I said to the camera. "My parents and sister abandoned me when I needed them most, and I choose to leave my assets to those who showed me true love and support, my husband Ryan, and the foundation that will be established in my name to help others facing similar circumstances." By the time we completed all the legal arrangements, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't expected. The letter and video were my voice, ensuring I would be heard even after I could no longer speak for myself. They were my final act of self-advocacy, my refusal to be erased by my family's narrative. The night after we finalized everything, Ryan lay beside me in the narrow hospital bed, careful of my 4 lines and monitoring equipment. "Are you at peace with all of this?" he asked softly. I nodded, resting my head against his chest. For the first time since the diagnosis, I feel like I have some control. Not over dying. That's inevitable. But over what my life and death will mean. He kissed my forehead, and I felt his tears dampen my skin. "Your life means everything to me," he whispered. "Then make sure my letter is read," I replied. "Make sure they hear my voice one last time." My final weeks arrived with unexpected gentleness. The hospice team managed my pain beautifully, allowing me moments of clarity amid the growing fog. Ryan rarely left my side, reading to me when I was too weak to hold a book, describing sunsets when I could no longer turn my head toward the window. Ashley came daily, bringing small comforts, a lavender sachet for my pillow, recordings of ocean waves to help me sleep. My parents called once, speaking to Ryan rather than me. "We're in Bermuda," my mother explained, her voice brittle with forced cheerfulness. "A last-minute getaway." "How is she doing?" "She's dying," Ryan replied, his usual gentleness hardened by months of witnessing their neglect. "She asks for you sometimes." A lie, I hadn't asked for them in weeks. But Ryan later told me he wanted them to feel the weight of their absence, to know what they were missing in these final, precious days. "We'll be back next week," my father promised. "Give her our love." They didn't come. Neither did Heather, though she texted occasionally with generic messages that felt copied from sympathy cards. I no longer had the energy to respond. The morning of what would be my last day dawned clear and bright, sunlight streaming through the hospice room window. Ryan had fallen asleep in the chair beside me, his hand still holding mine. I studied his face. The dark circles under his eyes, the stubble on his jaw, the worry lines that hadn't been there 6 months ago, and felt a surge of love so intense it momentarily eclipsed my pain. "Ryan," I whispered, my voice barely audible. His eyes opened immediately, alert even in sleep to my needs. "I'm here, love," he said, leaning close. I need you to promise me something. Anything. When I'm gone, don't let bitterness consume you. The foundation, the letter, they're about justice, not vengeance. Make something beautiful from this ugliness. He nodded, tears spilling down his cheeks. I promise. Ashley arrived mid-morning, bringing fresh flowers for my room. The three of us spent those final hours in a bubble of love, sharing memories, holding hands, occasionally laughing despite the heaviness in the air. I drifted in and out of consciousness, each awakening finding them still there, steadfast in their vigil. As evening approached, I felt a strange lightness, as if my body was becoming less substantial. The pain that had been my constant companion began to recede. I think it's time, I said, my voice surprisingly clear. Ryan climbed onto the bed beside me, cradling me against his chest. Ashley held my hand, her tears falling silently. You are so loved, Madison, Ryan whispered against my hair. So deeply loved. Those were the last words I heard as consciousness slipped away, carrying me into darkness and then, unexpectedly, into light. I wasn't there to witness what followed, of course. Ryan told me later, or perhaps I imagined him telling me, in those strange dreams that sometimes feel like visitations. Either way, this is what happened after I was gone. My parents and Heather arrived for the funeral 3 days later, dressed in expensive black, playing the part of the grieving family perfectly. My mother wept dramatically at the service, accepting condolences from people who had no idea she hadn't visited me in months. My father gave a brief eulogy, speaking of our beloved Madison, as if he had been by my side throughout my illness. They approached Ryan at the reception, offering hollow sympathies and not-so-subtle questions about arrangements. Madison was very organized, my father said, placing a hand on Ryan's shoulder. I'm sure she left everything in order. Ryan nodded, his face expressionless. Yes, she did. There's a reading of the will tomorrow at Nathan Fisher's office. You're all invited, of course. The following day, my family arrived at Nathan's office with expectant expressions. They assumed, as they always had, that their status as my blood relatives entitled them to my assets, despite their complete abandonment during my illness. Nathan began formally reading the standard legal language of my will. When he reached the portions specifying my wishes, my parents' expressions began to change from expectation to confusion. I, Madison Hayes Carpenter, being of sound mind, hereby explicitly disinherit my parents, Barbara and Thomas Hayes, and my sister, Heather Hayes, from any claim to my estate, Nathan read. This exclusion is deliberate and not an oversight. My father interrupted, his face flushing with anger. This is ridiculous. She was heavily medicated. She wasn't thinking clearly. Nathan continued, as if he hadn't spoken. My estate, including the Cambridge property left to me by my grandmother Sarah Hayes, shall pass in its entirety to my husband, Ryan Carpenter, with provisions that a portion be used to establish the Madison Hayes Foundation for young adult cancer patients. We'll contest this, my mother snapped, her grief performance abandoned. She was not of sound mind. Ryan clearly manipulated her when she was vulnerable. Nathan raised a hand. Before you pursue that course, there's something else. He placed a laptop on the conference table. Madison recorded this message and asked that it be played for you. My face appeared on the screen, gaunt, pale, but with clear eyes and firm voice. I explained my decisions, detailing my family's abandonment during my illness and their attempts to gain control of my assets before my death. While I was fighting for my life, my recorded self said, my parents were planning how to claim my inheritance. They sent a lawyer to have me sign over my property while I was on my deathbed. My sister called to ask about my will rather than to offer comfort. This is why I have chosen to leave my assets to my husband, who never left my side, and to establish a foundation to help others facing cancer without family support. The recording ended, and Nathan produced a manila envelope. Madison also left this letter, which provides even more detailed documentation of her experiences and decisions. It has been witnessed and notarized. Should you choose to contest the will, This letter and video will become part of the public record." My parents sat in stunned silence. My father was the first to recover, his face hardening into the cold mask I had seen whenever business dealings didn't go his way. "You've turned our daughter against us," he accused Ryan. "We'll see you in court." Ryan, who had remained silent until then, finally spoke. "You turned against her when you abandoned her during the worst time of her life. Madison gave you multiple chances to be her parents. You chose your image and your convenience instead. The letter simply tells the truth." My parents stormed out, but Heather remained seated, tears streaming down her face. After a long moment, she looked up at Ryan. "Was it really that bad?" she asked, her voice small. "Did they really send a lawyer to get her property while she was dying?" Ryan nodded. "That and more. They discussed her inheritance in the hospital hallway while she was still fighting for her life. They complained about how inconvenient and embarrassing her illness was. They never contributed $1 to her medical expenses, which nearly bankrupted us." Heather covered her face with her hands. "I didn't know. They told me Madison was confused, that you were isolating her from us." I believed them because it was easier than facing the truth. "The truth is in her letter," Ryan said, pushing the envelope toward her. "Read it. Then decide who you want to be, the person your parents molded, or the sister Madison always believed you could be." Heather took the letter with trembling hands. "I don't care about the money or property. I just wish I could tell her I'm sorry." "Show it instead," Ryan suggested quietly. "Actions speak louder than words." That's what Madison taught me. My parents did contest the will, as expected. But faced with the video testimony, the letter, and medical certification of my competence, they eventually withdrew their challenge. The public exposure of their behavior would have damaged their carefully cultivated image far more than losing the inheritance. Heather, after reading my letter, broke away from our parents' influence. She reached out to Ryan, offering to help with the foundation, seeking redemption through service rather than empty apologies. The Madison Hayes Foundation was established 6 months after my death, providing financial and emotional support to young adults facing cancer without adequate family support. Ryan used my letter and story, with all names included, as the foundation's origin story, ensuring that my experience would help others feel less alone in similar circumstances. My final words, written rather than spoken, had achieved what I hoped: justice without vengeance, purpose from pain, and a legacy that reflected my true values rather than my family's pretensions. 3 years after my death, the Madison Hayes Foundation had grown beyond anything I could have imagined. What began as a small organization operating out of my Cambridge property had expanded to a national network supporting young adult cancer patients who lacked family support. Ryan, now serving as the foundation's executive director, had transformed his grief into purpose. The architectural skills he once used to design accessible homes now helped create comfort spaces in hospitals and treatment centers across the country. Each space featured a small plaque with my name and the foundation's motto, "Family is who stays when the storms come." The foundation provided financial assistance for medical costs not covered by insurance, housing support for patients undergoing treatment away from home, and, perhaps most importantly, a community of volunteers who showed up when biological families didn't, sitting through chemotherapy sessions, delivering meals, driving to appointments, or simply holding hands during difficult moments. My letter, with permission from Ryan and our lawyer Nathan, became part of the foundation's materials. Anonymized versions were shared with patients facing family abandonment, showing them they weren't alone in their experience. The raw honesty of my words connected with people in ways clinical support sometimes couldn't. Heather's journey of redemption surprised everyone, perhaps even herself. After reading my letter, she had fallen into a deep depression, finally confronting the reality of our parents' manipulation and her own complicity. Rather than collapsing under the weight of that guilt, she channeled it into action. She completed her psychology degree and went on to earn a master's in counseling, specializing in supporting families affected by serious illness. She volunteered at the foundation, initially in small ways, answering phones, sorting mail, before gradually taking on more responsibility. Her first-hand experience with family dysfunction made her uniquely qualified to help others navigate similar situations. "I can't undo what I did or failed to do for Madison," she told Ryan during a foundation fundraiser. "But I can honor her by being the sister she always believed I could be, even if it's for others now instead of for her." My parents tried various tactics to salvage their reputation after failing to contest the will. They attempted to donate to the foundation, presenting themselves as grieving parents, continuing their daughter's legacy. Ryan politely but firmly declined their contribution. Madison was clear about who she wanted involved in her foundation, he told them. "I'm honoring her wishes." They eventually moved to Florida, distancing themselves physically from the community that had witnessed their abandonment of their dying daughter. They told new acquaintances about their tragic loss, crafting a narrative that cast them as devoted parents struck by unimaginable grief. But in Boston, the truth was known. The most profound impact of my story came from unexpected places. A hospice nurse who had cared for me during my final days was inspired to start a support group specifically for patients estranged from their families. A law student who had interned with Nathan during my case went on to specialize in advocating for terminally ill patients' rights. The ripples of my experience extended far beyond my own small circle. My grandmother's Cambridge property, which my parents had so desperately wanted to claim, became the foundation's headquarters. The building that had been intended as my future family home with Ryan instead housed staff and volunteers working to support others facing the challenges I had faced. The irony wasn't lost on anyone familiar with my story. Ryan eventually found personal happiness again, though not in ways anyone might have predicted. He didn't remarry or even date for several years after my death. Instead, he built a different kind of family, a community of people connected by shared purpose rather than blood. 2 years after my passing, he adopted a teenager named Jamie, whose parents had abandoned him after his leukemia diagnosis. Together, they lived in the upper floor of the Cambridge property, directly above the foundation offices. "Madison taught me that family isn't about DNA," Ryan explained when asked about his decision to adopt. "It's about who chooses to stay when staying gets hard. It's about love that doesn't come with conditions." The greatest lesson of my story, one I wish I could have learned without the pain of cancer and betrayal, was that family is truly defined by love and presence, not by blood or obligation. Those who stand by you during your darkest moments are your real family, regardless of what names appear on your birth certificate. The freedom that came from releasing expectations of those who had proven themselves incapable of unconditional love was perhaps my final gift to myself. In my last weeks, unburdened by false hope that my parents would suddenly transform into the supportive family I had always wanted, I found a peace I hadn't expected. I could focus on the love that was real. Ryan's devotion, Ashley's friendship, the kindness of my medical team, rather than mourning what had never truly existed. My letter ensured that my voice would continue to be heard long after I was gone. It wasn't about punishment or revenge, but about truth and justice, allowing me to write my own ending rather than having it written for me by those who had abandoned their right to tell my story. If you're watching this and struggling with family who have shown their conditional love during your hardest times, remember this: you have the right to define family on your own terms. You have the right to invest your emotional energy in those who show up for you, not those who share your last name but abandon their responsibilities. And you have the right to ensure your legacy reflects your true values, not the convenience or greed of those who failed you. Has someone in your family ever abandoned you when you needed them most? Or have you been fortunate enough to have unconditional support during your darkest times? Share your experience in the comments below. If my story has touched you, please like and subscribe to help others find this message. And remember, sometimes the family we choose brings more healing than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening to my story, and may you find the strength to create the family you deserve, whether related by blood or bound by love.